Well, an alternative plan to save water from the Murray-Darling Basin has been devised by the Wentworth Group of concerned scientists. It bases its recommendations on an economic model which looked at where water extracted from the river system yielded the fewest economic returns. Overall, the Wentworth Group proposed a 40% reduction in the water taken from the entire Murray-Darling Basin, with major savings coming from two key areas. In the Murray catchment area, they recommend a 39% reduction in water diversions and a massive 65% reduction in the Murrumbidgee river system. Tim Stubbs of the Wentworth Group joins me now from Canberra. Well, Tim Stubbs, what do you make of these recommendations?
Look, I think hydrologically the plan seems to be fairly strong and definitely in attaining that range of 3,000 to 7,600 gigalitres. That seems to be a hydrologically strong range. So I think that the numbers we're seeing are not sort of in disagreement with what we would anticipate.
You say that, and yet you've got irrigators up in arms. We just heard Barnaby Joyce talk about how he considers it even more than laughable, the estimates of what it's going to do to communities. The estimate of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority is a cost of $800 million to $1.1 billion in terms of lost agricultural production a year, 800 jobs. People are saying that's a vast underestimation. What does this do to regions?
I think we've got to look at a couple of things here. A lot of this is modelling and predictions. We've got to look at the data we have. Now, the Australian Bureau of Statistics recently released a report and that looked at the reduction in water available for irrigation from 2000-2001 to 2007-2008. Now, in that period, because of the drought, there was a 68% reduction in the water available for irrigation, yet there was a less than 1% drop in the gross value of irrigated agricultural production. So what we can see is when there is less water available, the water market allows irrigators to move water around to the area where it brings the greatest return. Now, saying that, of course, this reform is a big reform and it is going to have impacts across the basin. But those impacts are going to be specifically focused on some communities. So some communities in some regions may find this reform has little effect on them. Others will find it has a big impact. And
where will the biggest impact be? Will it be in those areas that have been targeted for cuts of up to 45%?
It will definitely be in the Murray and the Murrumbidgee catchments. And part of that reason is because the big environmental assets that sit on those rivers and sit downstream from those rivers are used to having, or historically had, large volumes of water because that's where the water is. The Murray and the Murrumbidgee are the large volume rivers. And so obviously, to meet the needs of those environmental assets and also the channel of the river, you're going to have to take more water out of those parts of the system than other parts of the system.
And what does that do to food production?
I think we've got to put the food production issue into context. I think Australia at the moment grows food to feed 70 million people. So the sort of concerns that, we're going to stop growing food to feed ourselves and we'll import all our food need to be thought about seriously.
But is that one of the problems with this report, and this is one of the criticisms of many of the irrigators, is that it's a report that's done very much on the environmental value without that broader discussion happening about what we do want to grow and where we want to grow it? Yeah,
I think, remember, the range that the report actually says is 3,000 to 7,600. We're now talking 3,000 to 4,000. Wentworth Group would actually say, why did we pull it up at 4? Maybe we should be thinking of slightly higher. I think we need to understand that a healthy environment actually underpins our industries, okay? The floodplains and the wetlands and flushing the salts out of the system are all critical to giving us clean water and a healthy river that can underpin industries right along the system, from the top to the bottom to the fisheries to the nearshore environment. We need to look at that whole perspective. At the moment, I think we are thinking that the river is just a resource there to use to make money. We need to keep that resource. As an engineer, I see it as a machine. We need to keep that machine in a state where it can service our needs long into the future.
I guess, though, how does a government make this plan politically palatable? How does it explain to the citizens of various regional areas who face losing, industries, potentially towns, according to some? How do you make it something that they can afford, the government can afford, and something that they can sell?
Well, I think the thing that no one's talking about when we're sort of looking at these job losses, and there will be job losses, and that is not a good thing, that's a difficult thing to deal with, but the government has $9 billion to do this reform. And if they bought all the water we need for the environment, that would cost them in the order of $5 to $6 billion. Now that leaves $3 billion. At the moment that is committed to infrastructure projects for irrigation infrastructure only. Now if you think about it, the towns that lose irrigation and the irrigators move out of, investment in irrigation infrastructure isn't much help to them. So we need to think about that infrastructure package and actually change that so that it is infrastructure that can help those communities that have been most impacted move forward. And if you break it down into looking at the number of communities that are likely to be impacted and the money that's available, you're looking at $200 to $300 million for these communities to actually adjust and broaden their economic base.
The point you make there about the money that's been put aside for infrastructure upgrades, is there also an argument, though, that better to do the upgrades first and then the buybacks? Because if the buybacks go first, you lose the critical mass that make the upgrades worthwhile.
No, I think the upgrades are very inefficient at getting water for the environment. It's a little bit like if I said to you, here's $100,000 to go and buy a car. You went and bought the car, and then a day later I said you had a litre of petrol to run it on. You'd be saying, well, why didn't you tell me that before I bought the car? I think we need to get the water for the environment, understand how much water is available for irrigation, where it is the right investment, upgrade infrastructure, but where communities can see that their future may not be in irrigation or it may be significantly reduced, we need some of that infrastructure funding to be available to those communities to plan what is their future going forward. Can they broaden their economic base, or is it time for that community to look to move somewhere else?